Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very special knife overview / review to share with you guys. This is the Cold Steel Espada Large. So those of you who are familiar with this knife, first off, this is the knife that Sylvester Stallone threw into the dartboard in the movie Expendables. I think it was this exact size of Espada. I'm not 100% sure. It may have been the medium one. But yeah, if anybody's like, that looks familiar, what's that from? That was actually the movie that this was in. There is a larger one, believe it or not. There is a larger version of this knife, the XL. I feel like this knife is famous enough now that people are kind of going to know, what this is. You actually can pick this up. I have a link down below where you can pick this up. I'll also include another link that will show the other versions of the Espada that are readily available, so you guys can check this knife out if you want to. This knife was sent to me by Logan. Thank you so much, Logan, for sending that. It's because of people like him that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content. It's also because of my generous patrons. Thanks so much for supporting me. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, get your hands on some of these stickers and some other benefits, there's a link down there as well. So Logan informs me that he actually carries and uses this knife quite often, and there are enough marks on this thing that I would say that is definitely the case. So sometimes I really like that. I appreciate it with a knife, especially one like this that is clearly intended to stand up to some pretty serious use. It's nice to see how it wears in over time. Now, first and foremost, I understand the primary idea behind this knife is more in the realm of self-defense, right? If you guys are not, new to my channel, if you've been around for a while, then you know I review knives as tools, right? I don't know anything about self-defense, and while I'm sure that there are benefits to learning some of these things, I just don't really, that's not really what I do here. So I get that it is, I'm going to be reviewing this knife as the object that it is, a knife. Whether or not, everything is put together well, the materials for the money, things like that. And then utilitarian benefits. So it's going to kind of go against the general idea of this, but I can't really speak on anything that I don't know. But that aside, let's go ahead and get started here. So the overall length of this thing, this is freaking huge. And I've wanted to look at this knife specifically because it is so iconic. Of all the knife videos that I've done, it's like I have to, even if this thing is not like the newest, greatest thing, I just have to look at this. I got to talk about it because I feel like I'm, it's blasphemy to not look at this thing, right? Good Lord, this thing is over a foot long. Yeah, 12¼ inches is what I'm getting, and it's a curved handle. So the XL's even bigger. Oh my gosh, this thing is huge. How about some size comparisons? We are zoomed quite a bit out today. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1, the Rat 1 coming in at a measly 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. If you've ever been wondering to yourself, gosh, the Para 3 works out really, really well, but I wonder if, putting the Cold Steel Espada Large in my pocket would work out for me. I'm going to say probably not. You got to have some pretty deep pockets for this guy to work out. Spyderco Para 3 coming in at 7¼ inches overall, by the way. How's the action on this guy? This is a triad lock, so it's got a lockback mechanism sort of thing. It actually is nice and smooth. I tried really hard to do like some thumb flicking, and you can, but you definitely have to wrist flick it. If you can get that thing without the wrist flick, bravo. I can do the reverse flick if I whip it, right? But that's hardly, it's more so just me like just using momentum to get it out. But I mean, to me, this knife is one that, if I'm going to deploy it, if I'm actually trying to imagine myself carry this thing, I'm just going to wheel it open like that. And honestly, yeah, it's pretty easy to open. I'm pretty impressed with that. Now, on the inside here, let's take a look. The inside, I think we are looking at, I can just barely see the reflection. It looks like phosphor bronze in there. Sometimes I think Cold Steel uses a combination of phosphor bronze and nylon. It's not really that big of a deal. If it is all phosphor bronze, great. The triad lock is probably the strongest locking mechanism out there in terms of a folding knife. If you care nothing else, you know, I mean, if you're like, I'm after a folding knife and I want the most durable locking mechanism that is out there. I mean, Andrew Demko, the triad lock, the scorpion lock, right? And he's got some new crazy lock. You know, there are plenty of locks out there that are plenty durable for things that you know, could expect to get into with a folding knife. If you're looking for absolutely above and beyond to the point where it's pretty much the excess strength is almost unnecessary. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think the triad lock is so strong that every other part of the knife will actually disintegrate far before the lock fails. So that's great, but if you're just left with a lock and a couple pieces of shrapnel surrounding the lock, then you don't really have, you just have a thing that is pivoting on itself, right? So the triad lock, yeah, I mean, it's the reason I poke fun at it a lot because, you know, people I think way too heavily, you know, their opinions way too heavily on the cold steel triad lock. Truthfully, I'll take, you know, in terms of like other folding knives, I will take some locking mechanisms that may not be as strong, but are strong enough for what I'll use the knife for and emphasize more so one-handed manipulation, right? This is a knife that, you know, to disengage, well, let's talk about like from pulling it from your pocket, you're going to open it like this, you're going to use it, and then while you can push that button and it's going to fall and then you can kind of turn it, it's kind of clunky. You know, and it's most of the time, in fact, to safely manipulate it for most people, even if you're, you know, used to this thing, you're probably going to need to use two hands. And that's okay. Some people don't mind. A lot of people like a classic lockback, and a lot of people really like the triad lock. You know, I, for one, still consider to this day the American Lawman to be one of the very, very best folding knives that exists in terms of just a utilitarian cutting tool. Absolutely. So that's my thoughts on that. You can hate me if you want. You can argue with me if you want. My thoughts have been the same since the beginning of this channel, and they're probably not going to change. But I am very impressed with the action. It's actually very easy to, you know, disengage the lock. It doesn't take a lot of pressure right there. And it's actually really smooth. I really wasn't expecting that, so that's neat. Let's go ahead and talk about carry profile here real quick. So, up against the Spyderco Para 3, it's really not as thick as I would have imagined. Honestly, I'm kind of impressed with that for how monstrous of a knife that it is. This doesn't really need to take place, but let's go ahead and do this. Up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3, two knives that I think have unquestionably awkward carry profiles that nobody ever seems to complain about. You can see that this thing is not going to be pocket friendly, plain and simple. Logan, I have no idea how you carry this, but you know, I got regular pants on with the regular deepness in the sweatpants, and this will go in my pocket, right? It will go in there. A lot of newer pants and a lot of stylish style, you know, pants that people wear, they don't have very deep pockets, men and women, right? So in regular jeans, right, or just regular work pants, this will just barely fit in your pockets. If you got super deep pockets, you got some, you know, maybe combat style pants, or you got some military pants, or you got some crazy, like, you know, I don't know what to you got tactical pants. Right? If you're big on tactical pants, maybe your pockets are a lot deeper, you can carry this. I'll tell you this, the overall, the height on this far exceeds the maximum height of the PM2, which is definitely a tall blade. Same thing with the Para 3, right? It far exceeds it at its maximum height. It also has a lot of awkward lines, and it is a big, heavy object. You will notice this knife in the pocket. There's no question about it. It seems silly to say that out loud, but I know that some people are considering knives. You know, if you just really like huge knives and you're used to carrying gigantic knives, then okay, you know. But this is big. The blade is super long. We didn't measure the blade, did we? We only measured the overall handle length. Let's go ahead and measure the blade. The blade length on this guy is almost 5.5 inches. The cutting edge is a tad over. It's almost 5 1/8, 5 1/16 maybe on the blade. Let me make sure here. Yeah, huge knife. Again, I can only imagine what the XL is, right? Let's go ahead and take a measurement of blade stock thickness here real quick. So the blade stock thickness on this guy, which doesn't look insane. Yeah, it's not insane, actually. It's about 100, and it looks to be, hang on, let me make sure that we're zeroed out in the right place. It looks to be Okay, 100 between 145 and 150,000. So between the Spyderco PM2 and the ZT0562 in terms of thickness, we are looking at a very polished G10 scale on top of steel, a lot of steel. Oh, I'm sorry, for the back spacer and the back lock. Now, these appear to be either nickel or aluminum. I'm guessing aluminum, right? So there's a little bit of weight reduction, but in terms of materials they could have used steel all the way around. That godforsaken flashlight. There we go. No milling on the inside. This, while they have taken, I guess, a couple of measures to make it lighter than it would have been with all steel, the fact of the matter is that it's still a really, really big, heavy knife. Not crazy. I honestly thought it'd teeter over 11, maybe even 12 ounces, but we're looking at 9.91 ounces. For how big this thing is, it's less than I thought it was going to weigh, but that is way... I like to carry big knives, or what I consider to be big knives, right? There are a lot of reviewers, a lot of YouTube reviewers who, don't like to carry knives nearly as heavy as what I like to carry. My range is about 4 to 6.25 ounces. I like an 8 to 8.25 inch knife, and maybe 4 to 6.25 ounces, something like that. And I consider myself to be somebody who likes to carry larger knives. This is way over the maximum for me. This is not something that I could carry every single day, especially considering what I do with a knife. Even considering periodically I like to carry knives like the SOCOM Elite, which are in that knife in and of itself is way too big for what I'm going to use it for. So yeah, this is a big knife. Again, if you like big knives, there's nothing wrong. You carry what you want as long as it's legal in your area. But considering the overall blade length, this is not going to be legal everywhere. It's also going to scare the absolute crap out of anybody who's, unless you are around somebody who is like all-in knife guy, right? This is going to immediately put a label on your head that says, I am carrying a weapon. Even if that is not your intention, even if you're just an enthusiast or just somebody who likes to carry knives, pulling this out to open up Karen's bag of pretzels at the front desk is probably going to scare the crap out of Karen. That's just the way that it is, right? I understand, lone wolf mentality, you do what you want. People are going to react understandably, considering us knife people are the minority, a minority in terms of like what is considered socially acceptable. So yeah, this is going to scare people and bother people. It definitely is. All right. Hardware check. Let's go ahead and get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, 2 items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down on the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every single video. Just open up the store and look for knife maintenance. Let's see here. I'm going to guess that pivot is it might be bigger. Yeah, it is. Let's try the T10 here real quick. I'm thinking that's probably what we're looking at for the pivot. So the pivot is, yeah, a T10. And then I think those handle screws are actually T6, which I don't know why cold steel does that, but I've actually seen that a lot on cold steel knives. They'll have a T8 or T10 pivot, and then they'll have T6. Like the Formax is the same way. Yeah, T6, T6. Pocket clip screws are T6. Yeah. Okay. If you want to take this knife apart, these triad locks and lockback style knives, in general can be a little bit tricky to get everything back together because there's tension back here, right? There's going to be a lot of screws, the pivot assembly, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then possibly some screws underneath. You're going to have a lot of parts everywhere. You're going to have T6 screws, so you got to worry about whether or not they're going to strip. It's not that the T6 isn't that big of a deal. It's the excess amount of hardware in combination with T6. And curiously, why T6? I always feel like bigger knives just generally use larger fasteners, or the larger fasteners would have seemed more appropriate on this. Whatever. It is what it is. That's the hardware on this guy. So let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy on this guy. So we have these polished. Honestly, the G10 scales look really, really nice. Unless I'm mistaken, yeah, that is contoured and polished G10, and the combination of these sort of aluminum. Let me get my fingerprints off of this because it really does look nice. And the presentation of this knife is really good. And honestly, the fit and finish all the way around is pretty impressive too. Everything fits and seems to line up correctly. Contact, right there. You can see contact on the triad lock. It's a couple of weird little things every now and then, you know. I mean, truthfully, it is impressive. And cold steel, I shouldn't make it sound like that, like I wasn't expecting there to be good fit and finish. Cold steel, these knives are not made in the United States. It seems like once a week, I talk with somebody that's like, what? I thought cold steel knives were made in America. I think that the general idea behind the knives and the aura surrounding them, I think leads people to believe that this is absolutely an American product. And no, actually most cold steel knives are made in Taiwan. Yes, even the American Lawman. If I'm not mistaken, one of the only, if not the only models that's made by cold steel that's actually made in the United States is one of the Formax variants. There's an Italian Formax variant, and then there's a US Formax variant. Yeah, most of these knives are made in Taiwan. Taiwan does have very good manufacturing. In fact, Taiwan is known for excellent manufacturing, so it's no surprise that, you know, this being a cold steel and it being manufactured in Taiwan, that the fit and finish and everything looks great. So yeah, and honestly, all of the edges here are knocked down. I mean, the knife has this very like pointy, jagged look, but truthfully, it is actually really comfortable in hand. Honestly, I mean, everywhere, I mean, aside from maybe the pocket clip, it's actually really nice. I'm really, really impressed with how well the lines meet up on everything. Let's talk about ergonomics. This knife has an enormous amount of handle, and while it has places that fix your fingers into certain spots, it is 100% made for the human hand. Here's position 1, here is position 2, and here's position 3 for my hands. And all of those lines lock you in. They knew exactly what they were doing with that handle shape. Same thing upside down, right? This caters to people, you know, whether you want to carry the knife like, in my opinion, it's really got two major positions. I would say here and here, upside down, right? So you technically have 5 different positions that you can carry this knife or that hold this knife comfortably and really lock in. Using this knife as a tool, I mean, yeah, it's definitely going to do it. It's got a big blade, and you're definitely going to be able to process whatever material you're processing, and you're going to be comfortable while you're doing it. Honestly, I could see myself using this knife for a long period of time, you know, without having to wear gloves. I would probably not choose this tool, but I'm saying if I had nothing else other than this tool, it honestly would be pretty comfortable. You know, I mean, the blade's not going to be optimal for every last little thing, but yeah, you could totally do it. It's mainly the fact that it is so big. You know, that's what's going to make it kind of awkward. But yeah, that's the truth of the ergonomics there. So the blade is this gigantic clip point or Bowie style blade. I'll tell you this, the overall aesthetic of the knife, you know, all the lines go together with each other. Like, this is not an aesthetic that I find personally like, yeah, I really want to, but it is very striking and nothing is out of place. The combination of the contoured black G10 scales with the bolster and then the lines, you know, for the handle that meet up with this blade sort of have this big S shape. And it really is all, it's kind of yin and yang, you know, it just all kind of comes together. Everything looks great except for the pocket clip is just kind of like, you know, there it is. It doesn't look like a cold steel specific or an Espada specific pocket clip. It's just a cold steel pocket clip, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be anything extravagant. And honestly, if they tried to make a Espada specific pocket clip, it probably would have been this gigantic thing that got in the way from some of those different hand positions. And obviously, the knife is designed around multiple hand positions. You know, in I guess a self-defense scenario. That's as much logic as I can apply to that. Back up to the blade, this big thumb disc tab thing it's got some jimping on it, and it's definitely big. It doesn't go any wider though than the you know, the scales or anything like that. And there's plenty of room to engage it, you know. And for the most part, it's not in the cutting path. So it seems like something that would really get in the way of a lot of stuff, and perhaps it would while you're cutting, depending on what it is that you're doing. Maybe it'll get hooked on something, I don't know. It appears to have kind of the thing that will catch your pants on the way out. So if you're like, you know, pulling this knife from the pocket and it needs to catch on your pants and deploy itself, I believe that it will do that. And I think that that's a big thing in the self-defense community, right? It's kind of like the Emerson wave. That's the idea behind that. That's neat. Not something that I really need in my day-to-day life, but if that's something that's important to you, then it's there. The blade itself is very well done. You've got a swedge up here that's a tiny little bit sharp. By the way, it looks like there's been an attempt to kind of polish this or change something up, and it's definitely been used, right? This blade does not come like this from the factory. From my experience with Cold Steel and their satin finished blades, they do a really, really good job. So we're not judging this on the... I mean, this is a user knife. This is a knife that Logan has gone out and used and likely has resharpened. It actually, yeah, it looks like it's been resharpened. I don't know if this is actually the edge angle that comes from the factory. But I will say this, you know, it feels like it is fairly thick behind the edge. And this is a knife that I can see people doing a lot of impact. I mean, honestly, if I was going to say one thing, one utilitarian job that this is going to be very, very good at, right, outside of self-defense, is impact cutting or chopping. There's a lot of weight and mass behind that blade, and the blade is somewhat thick. It will definitely still slice. It'll definitely still cut. Cold Steel does a good job with that, but this is not the type of knife where it's really going to benefit from insanely thin edge geometry. I mean, and to me, the edge is not crazy thick, right? It's not like the SE5, Becker BK2, anything like that. But it is pretty thick. But man, like this thing coming down, if you're trying to process like thick cardboard or wood or rubber or something like that, and for whatever reason you got to do a little bit of chopping, which is not something you should be doing with a Foley knife. But if this was the only thing you had, yeah, it probably is going to be pretty good at that. It's also going to have a nice puncture tip because of this clip point style blade, and there's actually quite a bit of thickness carried out to the tip. So despite this not being a blade shape that is traditionally durable at the tip, it's still going to do pretty well, at least in my assumption. What's the steel? S35VN. I think that's great. I think S35VN does well on little pocket knives. I think it does well on medium stuff. I think it does well on fixed blades. It's stainless. It's going to hold a pretty good edge. It's reasonably tough, especially considering it's a stainless steel. Cold Steel does a good job with it as far as I know. So that's great. I don't really have any complaints. The Espada, you know, the way that they, the font that they use, I think is appropriate. And then on the other side, you have the Cold Steel and then Taiwan and S35VN. I don't know that I really have a problem with that. Let's move down to back here. Again, I'm really impressed with how all these lines meet up right here. This is basically seamless. I can just barely feel it. They did a really, really nice job with that. He's got a lanyard on here. I don't think this comes with it. The pocket clip, like I said, it's just whatever. You know, the funny thing is the position of this pocket clip is not just looking at that. Like if I couldn't see any other part of the knife and I just see that, I'd be like, that's a shallow carry. But in relationship to the rest of the knife, right? I guess we got to count the depth of the pocket clip too. But is this knife likely to come out of your pocket? Not unless you're hanging upside down, right? If your occupation requires you to hang upside down a lot and you really want to carry the Cold Steel Espada, I'm going to say it's probably not the knife for you. For anybody else, this knife is going to stay in your pocket. It is the overall size and length and mass of the rest of the knife that's going to hold it in your pants, right? It's probably not going to go anywhere. Something that might be problematic if you really are going to carry this is getting this knife in and out of the pocket. It is definitely one that you're going to have to maneuver a little bit. You kind of have to come in like this and curve. If you're going to carry other things in your pocket, good luck, because this thing is probably going to snag anything else that's in your pocket and pull it out, right? This is kind of a, you know, the Espada is kind of a, this is my pocket. Go somewhere else. That's what this knife is, 100%. On lockout, again, this is a user knife. Side to side, nothing. Up and down, there's a minuscule amount of play. Obviously, if this is brand new, I wouldn't want to see that. On other Cold Steel Triad Lock knives, I haven't felt any vertical play, any side to side play on the ones that I've purchased for myself, which is basically, I think, the Code 4 and the American Lawman. I think those are the only two. No, nothing like that. And the ones I purchased were much newer variants. This has been used. It's obviously been beat on. Perhaps that has something to do with it. Perhaps tightening it down will make it a little bit better. On top of that, though, the nature of the Triad Lock and the way that it locks in place, it's not the same thing as if I felt lock slip or up and down play on a frame lock. That is much more of a cause for concern. On this, the way that it interacts, if you've ever seen a Triad Lock, you know, and the way that everything kind of hooks together, the three different points, no, it really, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, this is obviously going to, I don't know what it would take to actually disengage this. Probably putting either the blade or the handle in a vise and beating on the other end with a sledgehammer. That might do it. That doesn't prove anything, though. I imagine that the Triad Lock is going to hold up. So I guess I'm not going to count it off too much for that. This one right here is not quite centered. Let's go ahead and see, I'd like to just know for myself if I can get that to move back over just by tightening it up a bit and what effect that has on the action. So we'll get that T10 back in here, and we're just going to give that a little bit of a turn while we watch here. Will it turn? Is it? Okay, it moved a little bit. Oh, it's way too tight though. Way too tight. Okay, so that's not going to work. We got to get this where it's actually going to open up. That's actually a little too tight still. So these knives definitely have tight tolerances because I was not turning it too much. Let's make sure. Still no blade play, and it's still the minimal, very, very minimal up and down. So yeah, the tolerances on this thing are very, very good. You can always tell if you're just making a really teeny tiny turn and it affects the knife quite a bit. So this knife isn't centered. Now, maybe that's a product of it being used. It's not rubbing, by the way. It's just definitely not centered. Maybe that's a product of it being used pretty hard over time, or maybe that's something, you know, with the cold steel, you know, Espada line. I don't know. You know, the cold steel knives that I've handled, I think for the most part have been pretty centered. So I don't know. It's hard to say because this is a user. So I don't know if I'm going to judge it on that. And really overall, you know, considering what I generally look at on this channel, I will look at crazy things for the sake of looking at, you know, crazy things and just like telling you guys what I think. But generally what I'm looking for are knives that make sense for general carry or a little bit outside of that. You know, as far as like whether or not I can recommend them for the money. This knife, like I said, you actually can buy this exact version of it. They have lightweight versions, they've got smaller versions, they've got larger versions, right? This version comes in right now at about $250. S35 yen, what I'm assuming is aluminum and perhaps nickel coated something or other. And then polished G10. Fit and finish is really good. Durability off the charts, is unquestionably durable, right? I know 100% that this thing is going to stand up to pretty much any abuse you can throw at it. The only thing that's going to be stronger than this is a fixed blade, right? I should have said that early because there's always some guy that jumps in right at the beginning going, oh, it's nowhere near as tough as a fixed blade. I know that, and so does everybody else. Why do people keep saying that? I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to be mean. It's like, oh man, like, do people come in typing that up thinking that everyone's going to go, oh, no way. Oh man, I never thought of it. But anyways, yeah, it's going to be unquestionably durable. That's its main, you know, thing. And obviously the aesthetic. That, I would say, if anything outside of utility, the main draw to this is going to be the aesthetic. It's crazy. It's a conversation piece, right? Are you getting $250 worth of knife? I don't know. You know, for 250 bucks, it better be perfectly centered and it better lock up absolutely solid. Again, I don't know that maybe a brand new one does. You know, most knives over time, if you're really beating on them, it's understandable that they come off centered and have a little bit of play. Depending on the lock, that's more or less of a problem, right? The rest of the knife has really good fit and finish and the blade looks good. I don't know. It's really hard to say. Let me say this. This is the reason that it's not going to be a recommended knife is I'm not like dancing around whether or not you're getting the right quality for the money. I can't recommend this knife because, I mean, you guys can guess. It is nowhere near what I consider to be the appropriate size for EDC. Coming from somebody, again, who likes to carry knives outside of the realm of normal, you know, for what he considers to be a good EDC knife, right? Is it durable? Yes. Is it flashy? Yes. Is it well made? Yeah, as far as I can tell. Is it worth 250 bucks? That's up to you. Is it a good EDC knife? No. Not at all. But it sure as heck is interesting. Oh my gosh, I mean, this is crazy. It makes me want to see the XL version, right? I think we've gone on long enough here, guys. We're going on close to 30 minutes now. Logan, thanks so much for letting me take a look at this. This is super cool, man, and I appreciate the opportunity. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out, and if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.